What's up, YouTube family? Lou here with another Godlike Collectibles video. And this morning, drinking my coffee, and just wanted to make this video. It's super early. I don't even think it's 6 in the morning yet, but I couldn't sleep. And, you know, I guess those are the curse of working night shifts. But today, I just wanted to speak on my first favorite player. And, you know, for many of you that know, 23, Don Mattingly was that guy. He was the first player that I fell in love with in this game. And I was just thinking about him and thinking about the cards because yesterday I was dealing with, just putting cards and one touches and stuff like that. And I was going through some of my Don Mattingly collection. And I guess it just started to bring back memories of how great he was. When I started collecting, it was about 1987, I want to say, and that was at the peak of Mattingly's career. Um, you know, he, I know he was drafted, if I'm not mistaken, in 1979, but then he debuted in 82, and in 84 is when he had like that big breakout season. Where he batted, I think, 343, and he had like 207 hits or something like that. And then the following year, he became the MVP in 85. And, I started thinking about him and thinking about the cards I collected him and stuff like that. And I was like, man, I want to make a video. And, being that it's super early, I don't have to rush to do anything right now because everybody's still sleeping. I figure I'd come down to my basement and just talk, about what's on my mind, about collecting, about Don Mattingly, specifically. You know, I remember when I was a kid, the first time I ever went to Yankee Stadium, just going to a game with my dad and seeing the field for the first time, and being like in shock, in awe of how big it was. As a kid, thinking about in the 80s, I must have been maybe, anywhere between 8, 9, 10 years old when I went to my first game. And seeing, you know, Yankee Stadium. And not the new one that everybody knows, but the one before that. And seeing how beautiful the grass looks and everything compared to the way it looked in Little League when we played in Little League, it was no comparison. But during that time, I remember when I first started collecting, these were the packs that I was buying in 1987. And never forget when I first got a Mattingly card, I was like super excited. The 87 Mattingly, which is probably my favorite 1987 card because he was my favorite player. And you know, it's funny. I even though I know he's not a Hall of Famer, and I know a lot of people don't consider him a Hall of Famer because of him not having enough longevity in the game. But, when I think about it, I'm like, man, for a guy who ended up getting hurt early in his, getting hurt, and he didn't really get to play a full career because he retired young. The guy got 9 gold gloves. He's got an MVP. He's got a batting title. In the 80s, he was the best first baseman in the American League, hands down. Because, a lot of people argue Eddie Murray. And I get that Eddie Murray got better numbers than him career-wise. But if you look from the years of 84 to 89, um, Mattingly was the better first baseman. And Eddie Murray never won another Gold Glove after Don Mattingly started winning them. So that says a lot about how great Mattingly was. Um, he's a six-time All-Star, three-time Silver Slugger. He was just an awesome player. And unfortunate he never won a ring, never won a title. But, he was named captain, I believe, in 1991. But everybody to this day talks about Donnie Baseball. And it's amazing that till this day, we have cards that are still coming out in ultra modern time with Donnie's cards. Here's a guy that's not in the Hall of Fame, but yet his impact was so great in the game that we still have cards of him today in 2025, 2024, 2023. Every year, there's new Don Mattingly cards coming out. And I don't mean manager cards. I mean player cards of his. That they give him like some kind of card in the set. And to me, that just speaks to his greatness of the impact that he had in the game. And in the 80s, he was definitely that guy. Um, you know, I remember as a kid growing up, I was always mad because I wasn't a lefty, because I was a righty. And I was like, man, I wish I was a lefty if I could hit like Don Mattingly, you know? And I remember there used to be this local card shop, and it was a comic shop um, in the Bronx called Wild Comics. It was by Pelham Parkway area near the 2 train. And I remember that's where I used to go to buy my cards and comics and stuff when I was a kid. And, and obviously the local bodega, we used to buy baseball cards and the stickers for our sticker books and stuff like that. But I never forget, I always used to see this Don Mattingly card. And because it was the 80s and he was hot, his rookie card was expensive. And the funny thing, the card that I always remembered as a kid growing up wasn't the Donruss 84, but it was the Topps 84. It was this card here. This was the card that I always remembered as a kid, looking at it inside of a display case and not being able to afford it because it was going for like, I don't know, maybe $25 or $30 or whatever it was. And back then, for a kid, who's 10 years old, you know, and all you got is $2 or whatever it is that your parents would give you to go buy a pack of cards or whatever, it made me realize, I was like, man, I'll never be able to afford that card. And then, at the time, he was so good that you only thought that his card was going to continue to grow and be worth like $100. And back then, as a kid, that's a lot of money. But so when I started getting back into the hobby, that was the first card I wanted to target, was that 84 Topps. Eventually, I ended up buying his infamous 84, another great card. But there was just something about Donnie that, watching him play as a kid, like even when we were kids, me and my friends, we used to put the eye block, that black stuff on the eyes when we used to play because of Don Mattingly. And, even though I played second base, I never played first base. I always loved Don Mattingly. He was my favorite Yankee. Even when we had Ricky Henderson, even when we had Dave Winfield and we had all these big stars, Mattingly was my guy. No matter what, he was my guy, and even to this day, I still argue that um, he was the greatest first baseman in that era. You know what I mean? Um, and I will fight that to tooth and nail that he was the greatest. And I also believe that he should be in the Hall of Fame. You know, because even though his career got cut short, I think he did enough to show how great he was. Um, you know, and just growing up as a Yankee fan in the Bronx, man, Don Mattingly was the guy. He was that dude. I ended up getting his other rookie card, the Fleer, when I got back in the hobby. Ended up getting that one as well. And then I found the O-Pee-Chee one at the National last year in Cleveland. But growing up as a kid in the Bronx, we were always playing outside, playing baseball. Then we were in Little League, and you know, the Yankees. We were always, you know, talking about the Yankees and buying packs of baseball cards and trading cards with my friends. I remember having my binder, and at that time when we had those binder pages, and I had a book that was like dedicated just for Don Mattingly, and I had, I don't know, maybe like 60 cards of Don Mattingly, and I would like put them in there, and you know, I still have a bunch of those cards today. Um, I just ended up putting them in top loaders now, and but back in the day, man, collecting as a kid, it used to be so much fun. Have like a page of Griffey, have a page of um, who I had. I had Darryl Strawberry. In the '80s, it was Doc Gooden, Roger Clemens, and I remember just having pages of these players. But Mattingly was the one that stuck out the most because I had the most cards of his. I never had like a bunch of pages of any other player, but I had a bunch of pages of Mattingly. Um, and even now, as an adult, as a grown up, is like Don Mattingly's still my favorite player. Um, and I was just thinking about him because I was looking through some cards that I was putting in these new one touches. I ordered a box of one touches, and I just started like putting some of my cards in there. Some of my shiny cards, numbered cards, and stuff like that. And I was looking at some of these Don Mattingly's. I have like this Pacific Mattingly. It's a beautiful like blue and there's a nice little shine to it. And as I was putting them in there, I'm like, oh man, these are cool. And I couldn't sleep. You know what I mean? I guess because I work night shift, I work third shift, so I'm always sleeping during the day. So I went. I'm off to. I was off last night, so I went to bed regular time. But I was up by like 4 o'clock, and I'm just tossing and turning in the bed. So last night I was messing around with my cards, and I was like, man, let me get up. Here's the Mattingly hot glove from Flair. Um, I think this is 95, but this is a nice one. I picked it up at a small show. Very cool card. And then here's another Score Gold Rush. This is from 94. It's a nice Donnie card. The glare's a little bit crazy here, but it has some shiny to it. But Mattingly was that dude. Whoever got to live to see him play understands. Because when you got guys like George Brett and Wade Boggs talking about how great he was, um, that even George Brett says that he believes that Don Mattingly's a Hall of Fame, a Hall of Famer. To me, that's saying a lot. You know what I mean? Especially as competitive as George Brett was, um, you know, and he's one of the greatest third basemen. For him to say that, I think it speaks volumes on how great he was. I remember being so heartbroken, man, when they lost to the Mariners in '95, and then next thing you know, they win the freaking World Series the next year. I was like, my heart was torn because I was like, damn, if Mattingly would have signed for one more year and just been a DH or something, even if he was on the bench, just being a captain to the group, but at least if he would have gotten that ring, that would have been freaking awesome. But, you know, and then I remember in 1988, when the cards came out, the record breakers, and you had the Don Mattingly with Ricky Henderson doing like the high five with the red background. I have the card, I just don't have it in front of me. But that year that he hit the 6 grand slams in 1 year. Funny thing is, that was the only time, that was the last time he ever, the first and last time he ever hit a grand slam. Was in that year he hit all his grand slams. But it was just a special time in baseball. And even now with this whole debate about Cal Riley and or Riley, however you pronounce his name, Cal Riley, and Aaron Judge. I think we forget how important batting average is nowadays. Mattingly was a beast. He could hit for power, but he was a phenomenal hitter. You know, if Mattingly would have had how you call it, a career without injury, and would have been able to play 20 years like a lot of these other players did, man, he would have been one of those guys like Brett, like Cal Ripken, like Wade Boggs, that would have been in the 3,000 hit club. He would have had over 500 doubles. And, he probably would have had 1,500 RBIs because he was that good. And I laugh now because we see people care about the on-base percentage, but the on-base percentage back then was more impressive than now because guys walk so much now. And, a guy would want to rather walk now than try to get a base hit. Back then, guys used to fight for hits when they had men on base. They weren't trying to get a walk. If they were a hitter, like a Tony Gwynn or a Wade Boggs or Don Mattingly, they were trying to get a hit because they wanted to bring the run home. They didn't want to walk. So that's why a lot of these players, when you look at their stats, a lot of them don't have a lot of walks. You see the guys now, yeah, they got a 400% on base percentage or whatever, or 390 or whatever, but they got like 150 hits. Don Mattingly would have 200 hits in a season. Guys were hitting, 200 hits a year. Guys that were batting 300. Now it's like it's the normal now that guys bat 240 or 250. It's like, oh yeah, well, that's the normal. That's what everybody hits now. But why is that the normal? That to me, you're batting 250. You're not great. You know what I mean? You're not great. I remember guys were hitting in the 200s. They would get sent back down. Now you hit 200, but as long as you can hit 40 home runs, you're good. In this era, Dave Kingman would be the greatest because he used to hit like 30, 40 home runs a year, but he batted like 240. But I don't know, man. I just don't get it how the standards have lowered. And, when I look at guys like Bryce Harper and, and I see their MVP years, and I'm like, damn, I remember Griffey losing an MVP and he hit over 50 home runs. And he came in like 4th place in MVP. And he had over 50 home runs. And to me, Griffey was like one of the greatest players of all time and one of the greatest players I've ever seen, especially in the 90s. But, you know, just thinking about it, and the fact that Don Mattingly has a plaque in Yankee Stadium and he's so beloved. He was a captain. It just goes to show how great he was, you know. Shout out to Brent Richards, man. He was showing these the naturals, pinnacles, those dufects, whatever they're called. I never even knew that that's what it was called. I just used to thought it was just a shiny card. But he was showing this off the other day. He has the artist proof. This is the regular one, not the artist proof, just the regular. But I love this Mattingly card, one of my favorites. But you know, just thinking about him and why I fell in love with baseball. Um, you know, that's my personal connection to Mattingly. You know, growing up as a Yankee fan, my dad was a Yankee fan, so it just ended up being that I became a Yankee fan. And you know, my dad's favorite player was Mickey Mantle when he was growing up, from the Yankees. And then me growing up, Mattingly was my favorite Yankee. And it's funny how Mattingly ended up being the guy that was bridging the gap between those two eras, those two eras between the Yankees from the late 70s, early 80s into the, you know, those championship teams to the new championship team in 96. It's just a shame that he never got to get one, you know. But the way he played, his defense was amazing. The way he used to just scoop balls off the ground when people used to make a bad throw, you know. I remember the when when he got the popcorn from the kid in the stands, you know. There was just a this aura about Mattingly, man. Like he looked like what a baseball player should look like. The eye block, you know what I mean? The 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 way he used to play and get dirty and the way he used to swing. He had a beautiful swing. Um, you know, he represented that era. He was Yankee baseball back then. And, you know, like I said, I was just reminiscing. You know what I mean? Here's the baseball cards magazine. Just figure I'd show some Mattingly cards that I have. You know, here's another one that I received as a Christmas gift from my buddy Brad. And you know, it was just taking me back. You know what I mean? I just wanted to make a live and just talk. Um, you know, I got to watch him play live. I got to watch him play on TV. I got to see his career. Um, you know, all the drama about his hair. Oh man. But you know, he was special. He was a special player. You know what I mean? And you know, I hope he wins a World Series as a manager one day. You know, I hope he does. And I hope he does it as a Yankee. You know, but yeah, Mattingly was the best. If I had to if I was making a team, he would be my first baseman all time. If I had to pick one all time, because he's my favorite player, he would be my first baseman, hands down. And I know there's been some great first basemen, you know what I mean, in every era. You know, Lou Gehrig is probably considered the greatest first baseman of all time. Um, and he's another guy that his season, his playing career got cut short due to his illness, unfortunately. So who knows what kind of numbers he would have had. We probably would have been calling him the greatest of all time instead of Babe Ruth, because he was that damn good. Um, but you know, when I think of baseball, when I think of my childhood, um, when I think of my love for the game, I think of Don Mattingly, and I hope that one day he does get into the Hall of Fame. I hope that maybe the Veterans Committee or something will get him in. And you know, can you imagine? He's a guy that's not in the Hall of Fame, and his cards are expensive. You look at, and here's another thing, that a point that I want to make. Like I was saying before, his cards, he still has cards coming out every year in the ultra modern era. That's insane. And he's not in the Hall of Fame. Never won a World Series. But yet, guys that are in the Hall of Fame don't get as many cards made and produced as much as he does. So it goes to let you know that the kind of impact this guy had, he deserves to be in the Hall. I don't care what anybody says. And I'll argue that until the day I die. I think I get it. There's a thing for longevity and guys hitting milestones, and that's cool. But I'm the kind of guy that, if your peak was a good player throughout your whole career, just a good player throughout your whole career, but because you got to play 20 something years, you were able to accumulate numbers, yeah, that's great. You were healthy, you got lucky, God bless you. But when you look at a guy like Mattingly that had a 6-year peak where he was averaging 30 homers a year and batting 300, almost 200 hits a year, that's a great player that unfortunately, because of injury, couldn't sustain the longevity that these other guys did. Now, mind you, with all his illnesses, his ailments, and him retiring, I think at 34 or 35, he still got over 2,000 hits. So imagine if he could have played and extended his career. He would have been in the 3,000 club, without a doubt. There's no doubt in my mind. And who knows how many more gold gloves he would have had. Because he was getting gold gloves and he wasn't even 100% with his back. He probably would have edged out Keith Hernandez. But we'll never know because he got hurt. And it's unfortunate. But, like I said, when I think of baseball, when I think of card collecting, when I think of, these were so cool opening these packs up when I was a kid. And I remember I found this at a store. I can't remember where it was. It was a local card shop somewhere that I went to. And I found it and I put it in this package to preserve it. Just to remind me of the first packs that I used to open when I was a kid. You know what I mean? The first Topps packs that I used to open. So, but this hobby is so great. There's so much negativity around the hobby because of what it's become as far as the everything that has to do with it. With the grading, the values, the money that's involved, the scamming, the this, the that, the other. And for me, it's like sitting down yesterday, bagging up all these cards, in these new one touches. I was just having fun, sleeving them up, putting them in here, taking them out of the older top loaders, and just putting these cards in these cases. It was just fun, man. It was passing time, listening to YouTube videos in the background on the TV while I just look at my cards. And it's just something about collecting baseball cards that takes me to a time and a place when everything was simpler, you know? when being a kid, grabbing my bat and my ball, my glove, and just going out to play in the park. And when I play Little League, and, you know, all those things that go through my mind when I think about when I was a kid, you know, playing catch with my dad and, you know, learning the game from my father. And even to this day, having conversations with my dad about the Yankees and talking to him about baseball. It never fails. Every time I talk to him, he lives in Puerto Rico, and every time him and I call each other and we're on the phone, and, you know, we get all the stuff out the way. How you doing? How's this? How's that? How's the other? Then he'll come out. He's like, so let's talk about some baseball now. He's like, so the Yankees, this, and the other, and, you know, and these are things that I cherish and I think about because I know that, you know, as time goes on, I know these are things that won't last forever. But my memories, it would always last in my memories as long as I'm alive, you know. And like I said, when I think about Don Mattingly, it takes me back to that comic shop I used to go to in the Bronx in Pelham Parkway. And I used to buy baseball cards and comics. And I used to see, you know, the Roberto Clemente cards that I couldn't afford, the 1972. That was the infamous Roberto Clemente card. And the 1984 Don Mattingly Topps card that I couldn't afford. And now that I'm older and I'm able to afford them, I have them now. And when I look at those cards, it just takes me back to that time, you know. Sometimes I get emotional, you know, but yeah, like I said, I just wanted to make this video of the my first favorite player that I ever had. So take care. God bless. Be safe. Peace.